Thank you very much. Those stats is a bit funny because that's a few years old, some of those. I'll probably update a couple of them, but they're all pretty much in the right path. I'd like to, first of all, begin today just by paying my respects to the Arikina peoples for their elders, past, present and future. I also do want to pay my respects to everybody who is here in the auditorium as well. We are the people who create the stories that share the beautiful country that we live in, and tourism is a storytelling business. So I do want to say that each and every one of us do every day tell stories that connect us to country and connect the world to what we have to offer. So I will start off with a little bit about how my story began and where the dream for Peninsula Hot Springs started. And it was actually in this pool, which was a place in Japan. It was in 1992. I was sitting, I actually had been sent over there when I was in that corporate life we were talking about, and on a government fellowship, and spent a couple of months studying Japanese and had a headache in Tokyo, and my friend said, let's go to a hot spring, and I had no idea what a hot spring was. So I was taken away to this hot spring in the town of Kusatsu. It's about 2.5 hours from Tokyo. It's in the mountains. This was just towards the end of winter, but as you can see, there was snow all around, and what it did, it was an epiphany moment in my life. It was a moment when I said, wow, this is the sensation of lying there in the snow, in my birthday suit, looking up, and it just made me feel at one with nature and with everything around me. And I thought, why don't we have this experience in Australia? And in fact, it brought me back to my home country, to the Mornington Peninsula, where I've been brought up as a child. I was born in Melbourne, but I was brought up, a lot of our time was spent on a farm on the Mornington Peninsula. And the sensation I had here in the snow in the middle of a winter environment was exactly like lying on the beach in summer, where you just felt that oneness, the oneness with the environment. And I just said to myself, I'd love to bring that experience to Australia. At that stage, I went off and spoke to some hydrogeologists in Japan and said, what are the chances, and geologists, and said, what are the chances there being hot springs in Australia? And they said to me, oh, look, Australia's a very old country, it's very flat, there's not much chance at all. Little did I learn, and I'll show some slides later on, there are actually hot springs in every state of Australia. And Northern Territory, as I've learnt over the years, is gifted with amazing hot spring resources. So what I did do once I learned there was hot springs, learned about hot springs, I started visiting them all around Japan, and I visited probably 100, 200 hot springs around Japan over those couple of years. But it wasn't until 1997 that I had moved jobs. I used to work for a big Japanese trading company called Mitsubishi, but I was exporting in the food industry. So they own the car company. The car company is a subsidiary, but it's the big trading company. So you would probably know of them here because the Northwest Shelf is owned, the gas projects is 50% owned by Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi, when I joined them, exported more than BHP exported. They're a very big company. But I started working with, I worked with them for a number of years, and then ended up, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. The hot pools, in fact, I'm going to go across to the next one and talk about what is the core parts of my story and how I want to relate across to us and share some messages. And really, I think as I started, everybody has this story to tell, and that story is something that we own, each and every one of us, and so we need to be able to tell our stories. We also want to have some fundamentals behind why are we doing something, and the purpose for our doing something. And in my case, at the very beginning, it was to give that sensation to people, and to make people try and connect with nature and the environment around them. And that's where it came to my purpose. And as you move into a business, you realise that you are the community and the community is you, and you have to actually grow. And as your business grows, you have to be able to work with and engage with the community around you. Now, the background of my story, and that's where I lost my train of thought, was I was travelling, visiting hot springs in Japan, and then in 1997, I had moved and started working with the Australian Embassy in Tokyo, again in the food area, and working in trade facilitation in the food industry. And I was having a beer with the head of the Victorian State Office after work one day in 1997, and this guy, Kevin Knowles, and he said, look, you're a little bit too entrepreneurial to be a diplomat. What do you want to do with your life? And I said, I'd love to do hot springs, remembering 5 years back when I first topped in that hot pool that I showed the picture of. That was in 92. In 1997, when I have this discussion, I said, I'd love to do hot springs. And he said, you know, I think there's hot water on the Mornington Peninsula. And as it turned out, the Department of Minerals and Energy had done test drilling right across the state, and they'd just come across this water there. And it had ended up in a report 14 years before and had been sent across to him. Nothing had come from it then until I walked through the door. And I thought, well, this is amazing, because it was a place where I'd spent my childhood. It was a place where I'd been thinking when I was lying in that pool of where we could introduce it, and there was hot water there. So it sort of felt like the world was conspiring for this thing to happen. A couple of months later, I got my brother involved, my brother Richard, and he came across. He'd just finished his work in the city, in Melbourne, and he came across to Japan on a tour. I brought him across to a hot spring, and I said, after we jumped in, I said, how about we go into business together and start this business? He thought about it for a little while, and we ended up buying. By the end of 97, we bought a 42-acre property on the Mornington Peninsula and started what was a very long and arduous journey to get the place started. In fact, it took us from December 97 until 28th of June 2005 before we could open up for business. It was effectively 8 years that it took before we could even open for business. I'd quit my job at the embassy by 98, and I became what I call the Dickney, double kids, no income, and then I became a Trickney and a Quickney. So I had 4 kids and no real income, but I had a dream which owned me, and that has only continued on because I was very much caught up in passion and purpose. We opened the business. I wanted to talk about what something that's really influenced me in terms of when you're looking at a business, you want to make sure it's viable, and you want to make sure it's done for the right reasons, and you want to make sure you can grow very well. Now, this is just a little extract from a book by a guy called Jim Collins called Good to Great, and it talks about the sweet spot of making a business work. And it was based on, publicly listed companies and research that they did, but I think the same principle is still very, very prevalent and very relevant for all of us. And that is that you need to be doing something you're absolutely passionate about. You want to be working in somewhere where you can really own that space and be one of the world's best at it. And then finally, it can actually make a profit. So before you walk into your business, you want to make sure that you can actually make a profit. And when I looked at that, I thought, well, we've got a hot spring, but to be the best in the world, it means that you have to go out and see the world. And you have to go out and learn about what it is that you are, what's your field, and it doesn't matter what your field is. There's always going to be places where you can benchmark. There's always going to be other businesses who do it better. And it's not about being the best, it's actually about being with the best, standing alongside and walking with the best people. So when we've got our goals for our business, one of them is to be one of the top best hot springs in the world. One of the top 5 best hot springs in the world. And that's deliberately saying one of the top 5 because we're not aiming just to be number 1. We're actually aiming to know who the other 5 are, aiming to have a global network of associates and people that we work with who we can benchmark against, and we can all grow up together and just improve and improve and improve our customers' experience so they keep coming and the customers keep turning up. Now, our business has grown on that principle for a very long time. We've grown on average around about 20% per annum since we opened in 2005, and now we are receiving about 500,000 visitors. So it's a little bit more than the 450,000 that was mentioned before, and it should go up to about 750,000 within 3 or 4 years. So there is growth, but then there will also be enough. And that's one other important thing that we're getting to, is that our site, that particular site, you can build things in other places, but on that particular site, once we get to around about 750,000 visitors, it will be maxed out. We won't be able to have any more visitors, and that'll be it for there. I mean, obviously you've got to keep them happy, but it's about what is enough to deliver a good customer's experience. This is, oh, there we go, the slide didn't quite roll over properly. I've got this because we spend a lot of time in our business really looking at this sort of purpose, promise, and that one under there. Up there says practice. But basically it's about the fundamentals of our business and spending a lot of time thinking about what is it that we do and what is it we're trying to achieve. And our purpose was read out before, and it has actually evolved even a little bit from here, and where it says to create experiences where people relax in nature and with each other and connect with the wellness of their being. And it's very important that we say the "and with each other," because it is all about trying to develop experiences which connect people together. We have a few goals which we aim for, and one is and fundamental principles, and some of them are, you know, trying to create some international understanding through the hot spring experience. Integrity and fairness, so whenever we do business, whatever we do, we want to make sure that we're doing it with great integrity. And corporate responsibility to society. And that was that community piece that I mentioned before. But I think companies aren't just there to make money for the owners. They have to make money. If they don't make money, you're not sustainable. And there's no sustainability in a loss, unless you're a government and you can sort of do it, but then you've still got to get the money back eventually from somewhere. So even governments can't live at a loss, and businesses definitely can't. We get you can't pay your wages, you become insolvent, and if you do that consciously, you go to jail. It's actually illegal. So you have to be able to be sustainable as a business, and that is trying to be profitable. The more profitable you can be, the better it is, because then you can reinvest in the other things that really matter, and that is your customer's experience, and then building a better community around you. So really, that's a broader story, but really it was only this part that I wanted to show today, which is to creating those experiences. This just shows you, and it's really just for an example, that is our current facility, or mostly our current facility. We have, you can see all of them require lots of car parking. As we know, right around the Northern Territory, there's car parks everywhere. We like to see them full, and it very often is, which is we're very grateful for. We have a whole series of hot spring pools. I'll show a couple of photos in a minute so you can actually see the real thing. But some of the interesting things that we have evolved just recently, in this area we have an amphitheatre area. It's got 7 pools that look down over, and some terrace seating, look down over a lake and to a stage. And on that stage we play music, different performances, and it's really where we've started to evolve our business from being an experiential business into being a transformational business. And when I say that, we're trying to, and NT is very set up to be able to do this, the transformation. It's where you've got visitors who are really good people, but you're trying to get them to become good people plus something. So they become slightly better versions of themselves. And we want to see that coming through art and culture. And so we've created some of these spaces which are functional spaces, so you can lie in a hot pool and listen to music, lie in a hot pool and watch Star Talks. In fact, the 7 hot pools here each have underwater speakers, and you can float in the hot pool and look up at the stars while we have people doing Star Talks. And you can be floating and looking up. Now, it's okay there, but we have the light pollution from Melbourne, which is only across the bay. Here, this would be heaven, absolute heaven, to be able to have underwater floating experiences where people can listen to talks from people who can take you through the night skies. And the desert here is just an absolute gift. We also have here, which is another area which is half open at the moment, but opening up later this year, which is what we call the food bowl. But it's actually a food production area. It's got 7 terraces that go down to a lake at the bottom, and you can sit in the food production area and listen to music on that stage as well. So you've got these sort of functional things with practical, fun experiences, and you're just trying to reimagine the experience that people have. The food is all being used in our cafes. So we're aiming for slow food, seasonal, local, organic, whole. We want to have people we see ourselves in the health and wellness industry, and that is about delivering at every touch point a good, healthy experience for our customers. I'll show you a couple of other things we have, but here I'll talk about in a minute. That's one of our culture areas, and that's what we call it's a women's business area, and actually down on a property next door we own, there's a sort of a men's business area which has been developed with our local Bunurong community, and they're areas to share culture. So, but I'll show you some actual photos in a minute. We are this year opening up some glamping and then some lodges later on this year, so we will have 126 rooms of accommodation, which we will slowly grow as demand allows us. So hopefully when these open in about June, the glamping tents, it will go, right, the accommodation's really going to work, which it should. When you've got 500,000 people coming to your front door, you should be able to get a few of them to stay, particularly when they're lying in hot water, because they don't really want to travel anywhere. Once they lie in water, they just want to stay, rest and relax. So here we've got just a couple of shots of our place. So that's the amphitheatre now. That does actually have a roof over it, but that was when we were playing a music concert and people are lying in pools or lying on the grass around it. We've got those two pools which have got, they're actually both sunset, but that's a 360-degree view pool. A lot of our facilities we have designed with Instagram in mind. So when you're marketing anything, when you're doing any product, when you're taking people anywhere, you've got to think of the Instagram photo. I was with a Tourism Australia mission and Tourism Vic, but it was a combined mission, went to Korea and Japan. And then we were in there with JTB, one of Japan's largest travel agents, and this was 2 years ago, so it was a little while ago now, but they basically said, the head of marketing for JTB said, there's one way to market your business, Instagram. And then she said, and there's another one, Instagram, and another one, Instagram. So she just said that was the only thing that people are using now. So the number one thing is to get those memorable moments, to get those photos, and to be able to make them shareable. And that is, you know, we do it all the time. And obviously here, again, Northern Territory, it's an absolute gift that you have. We play with other things, so we're doing various clays from around Australia so people can play with art and a tactile experience and aesthetics, because clays are very good for your skin. They've been used from cultures all around the world since time immemorial. People have always put clay on their skin because they know it's good, and people package it up and sell it to you out of France and out of the world. They'll sell it to you and you put it on, do your face packs and things like that. But we've been turning it into an experience where people can delve into their creative self, but it's also designed for an experience which is for a hot environment, because when you put clay on, it evaporates. So it's sort of that Coolgardie evaporative cooling technique that you can apply yourself, but it's also fun. So there's just a few spots. This is part to do with when we first started, we saw ourselves as wanting to be, and we felt we could be, a iconic product in our region. And we felt that hot springs were a real gift. It was a gift from nature, it's a gift from the environment, and we wanted to be able to share that gift. But we did it we said from the very beginning that we want to partner with as many businesses as we can. One, because we wanted us to be seen as a central product. And so we started creating packages from very early on. And now there's about 94 packages just in our local region, and that's whether it's dolphin swim and bathe, ride and bathe, whether it's stay and bathe, so staying at somebody else's accommodation. We have 3 cafes, and we've still got 8 packages, and there'll be more coming on all the time with other dining facilities, whether they're wineries, restaurants and so forth. But they're packaging up to make it really easy for visitors to come and visit. And to enjoy the whole region, enjoy the whole experience. Now, one of the big benefits that has is with SEO and the social media and being found on the search engines. Because when you go to things like Google, their algorithms say that we need to try and find places that are relevant, not places that cheat. You know, there are many companies that run around and say, I'll get you up the top of the search engine rankings, and they'll do all of these games to try and cheat the system. But the best way, and what Google's really after, is relevant experiences for people who are really trying to search, and so not to waste people's time. Now, if you've got packages and people are looking for things, then they find us, so you become right up the search engine ranking. So we sit at number 1 nearly in all of our major keyword searchings, and it means that we end up having around about, well, it says 5,200, it's about 6,000 now, unique website visitors to our website every day. We've got a fairly large email database. We're on Facebook and Instagram. They're things that are really, really important for what we do, but a lot of it is driven out of these partnerships. There's real partnerships that we have. Just a couple of other things. Gift vouchers, they're really good, and this is one of the ways we've been able to partner with other products where it can be a real hassle. Basically, you can sell these passes to other products, and then they can use those passes to be able to package up with their own product. So it has just been an easier way to partner with other people. We've also, at our product, we put up, we've got 2 brochure racks that we've put up, you know, for nothing, just to help people in trying to get those links between us and other places and each other in our region to make it the best experience it possibly can be. So they're just a couple of things that we've been actively doing. This is the men's and women's business areas, and I just wanted to show you, this is when we were with Auntie Carolyn, who's one of the senior elders of the Boomerang, which is a language group that goes from Melbourne, so it's half of Melbourne, and then on the Yarra, and then it goes right down to Wilson's Promontory. And she's one of the senior elders, and I've known her for 20 plus years, so we engaged with her at the very beginning when we started our project, because our project was about people connecting with nature and each other. And it was about creating community. And so part of that community, obviously, and the people who understand nature are our Indigenous community. They live for the environment, as we all should. And they live to care for the environment. So we need to do that learning, and particularly down south, where the culture has had a whole lot more decimation than it has had up here, and you've got some beautiful, fully intact culture areas here, which are just a gift to the world. But we work with Auntie Carolyn on the design of this women's area, and then we work with Uncle Max on the men's area, and they opened up about a year ago, and now we do these talks and different activities and in both of the areas. They're very simple. It's a place to sit around a fire and have a conversation. It's a place to be present with each other and be heard and let other people hear. So it's a very, very important part for us to respect the environment around us and the people of our country. Some of the other things that we do in terms of our corporate responsibility, and it's a very important part of our business, is working with some key partners. One is Mental Health Australia. So Peninsula Hot Springs became the first corporate friend of Mental Health Australia about 3 years ago. And we also work with one of our local mental health organisations, Mentis Assist, and we do fundraising activities. We allow carers and some people who are being cared for to come to the Springs and have a regular activity which they can do and try and create spaces where they can feel like they're part of the community, because it's loneliness and isolation, which is a very big problem we have in our whole society, and it is one of the big causes of people, suicide, the horrible rates of suicide that we face. and just loneliness, just unhappy community. And I think tourism as a storytelling business, and particularly the wellness side of tourism, is a huge opportunity to engage with the mental health of people. The final one that we have is our major pack of partners in our community engagement is with Move. They've actually changed their name again. They're MSK now, Musculoskeletal Australia, and they're basically an arthritis care place, and that's because hot springs are very good for arthritic. And warm bathing is very good for arthritis conditions, people with rheumatoid or osteoarthritis. Just being able to get in hot water is a very good thing for it. And so we do a lot of work with them as well. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about our hot spring industry. Do we have a time clock somewhere? What time have I got to? Yeah, because I wanted to have a bit of question time as well. So if anybody does have any questions, I want to try and leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end to take any questions that people have. We are working on a program of connecting hot springs, both locally in our local area, in Victoria, across Australia and across the globe. I actually also chair an organisation called the Global Wellness Institute Hot Spring Initiative, which is based out of New York, and we have 15 directors from countries right around the world, from China, Japan, from around Europe, South Africa, 15 different countries around the world. And in fact, this morning I responded to another one from Russia, from another organisation that wants to become part of this group. The idea being that we want to be able to connect this hot spring culture around the globe and all learn with each other. And it was where I was talking about trying to specialise in your industry and get to know people in your industry on a global scale to be able to benchmark and improve what it is you do and be able to deliver on your experience while growing your whole community. So in this case, what I did, from when I first started in 1992, they told me there was no hot springs in Australia. And here now we have hot spring potential right across Australia. The operational places in Victoria right at the moment, I've got a photo of Australia coming up in a second. Mornington Peninsula, which is us, and there's a little one in Warrnambool. But Phillip Island's about to go under construction, which you can see here, and that's going to be looking out over the coast. And while we have big sharks there, they don't eat people, so it's not quite like here where you've got the crocs where they do eat people. But and there's great surfing out there and penguins as well, which the sharks like, so that keeps the sharks full. Then that's the one in Warrnambool. Now they're just redeveloping that. They do have one, but they're doing a major redevelopment. 12 Apostles Hot Springs, that one's a project which is they're still working on getting finance for that one. This is one we're working on in Meetung in East Gippsland, which is not far from the New South Wales border, and that will have a huge economic impact for the local community. We did economic impact analysis for this with EY, and that one's going to deliver $400 million of economic benefit to the local community. Our Peninsula Hot Springs is going to deliver just under $1 billion, $987 million to the local community as flow-on economic benefit. The importance of mentioning all of this and the growth is that there's a really good opportunity, and that's what I'm going to refer to in a little bit, but of using water as a connector, using the water story as something which is able to connect right across our state, right across the country and right across the globe. And I think NT has some of the best water, you'd know very well, some of the very best water holes, some of the very best hot springs, some of the best resources, and it just needs some good coordination and connection to be able to bring it together. So there are hot springs in every state of Australia. I've just mentioned a couple from NT here, so that's just Mataranka, but I've got photos in a second of other ones. Zebedee Springs in WA, Shark Bay's got them. I've been working on a project over here in Perth, at Tawari Hot Springs, and I'll show you a photo in a minute. So there's ones there. Dalhousie Springs, world's largest hot spring by flow rate, right there in the middle of the most remote location in the centre of Australia. and then right through New South Wales, Moree, Pilger, Walgett, Lightning Ridge. There's just hot water over about 25% of the Australian landmass, they say, is the Great Artesian Basin. The reality is there's a whole lot more heat underneath us. Even Hastings Caves and Thermal Springs in Tassie has warm water. It's not super hot. This is just a couple of examples of other projects across Australia which we're working on. The Cunnamulla Hot Springs, I've just been doing this. In fact, I was working on another sketch for this project with a designer this morning. Basically, it's an outback town in southwestern New South Wales. They have to cool the water before they drink it. Their town drinking water, it comes up warm, it comes up hot, and and it's like that right across the country. So we are designing a facility which will be embracing the it looks like the Yarra River, which still it works. If you go to South Bank, get people there. So brown water doesn't necessarily detract, although the blue water is a bit nicer, like on the Swan River, this one in Perth. But we've got a whole series of facilities there. This is the one in Perth, which again, that's going through its final permissions with the council over there in Perth, and then that will be built as a facility where I've been helping them doing the design. I'm not financially involved in either of those ones, but I do help because I like to try and build the community, and there's safety in numbers, and we can actually tell a story if we can go right across the country, having these beautiful hot springs right around the country. We've got a huge ability to grow the pie and grow together. Now these you won't be able to read them, but it's just examples of some of the hot springs around Northern Territory. Most of you will know them, but you've got things like what do we got? Mataranka, and then you've got Douglas Hot Springs, and then we've got the Catherine. And that's another one which I can't read myself. This is an amazing one I've only just recently been able to find out about, and that's Lorella Springs up on the Gulf up here. They're on a 1 million acre property, and they have these hot springs and water experiences all over it. I've never seen anything like this and I've actually been to 46 countries, not 34 or whatever it was. I've been visiting hot springs and researching right around the world, and I've never seen a wonderland like this. This is, and I haven't visited that one yet, but it's on my, it's more than my bucket list. I'll be there very soon, I'm sure. But it just shows you that there are springs all over. That just shows you some of the experiences. They're my daughters. She's actually 16 now, and she's 17. She's 15. And that's my kids way back when we were visiting some of the different springs here. So that's in Catherine. That one is at Douglas. I was there 2 years ago on a bike trip, a motorcycle trek across the WA from Perth, from Darwin. You've got Mataranka. That's the Rainbow Springs. You've got the Bitter Springs. It is an absolute wonderland. In fact, when my son, that son right there, who's now 19, when he jumped in there, he said, "This is better than the Barrier Reef." And he was diving down there. It was crystal clear. You had tortoises swimming through the water. You had fish swimming through the water. He'd only been to the Barrier Reef, a year before, and so but his first reaction was that, and that was unprompted. You have got resources here which are just stunning. I also just yesterday went to visit a place called Tipperary up near the Douglas Daly. There's a property up there. It's nearly 1 million acres. Property, it's mainly a cattle station, but they've got hot springs. They haven't developed it at all. They've in fact got a airstrip which is 2.2 kilometres long and could land, the aeroplane I flew from Melbourne on, could land on that airstrip. It is ridiculously amount of amazing resource that's right there. 2 hours drive north, you've even got, but it's on the main track. They've got this hot spring, and that was me yesterday. So I was just here yesterday and looking at it, and that kind of experience with a little bit of work, because you want to maintain the nature, you want people to be in nature, that's what they want. with a little bit of work, this could just become one of those huge stories of the Northern Territory, and you get numbers like what we get, the 500,000 people going to places. You wouldn't want 500,000 here and you wouldn't expect it, but you could easily get 50,000. And that's a damn good business. And it's really good because people will be staying extra nights. They'll be wanting to do tours around the area. They'll be wanting to connect with all these other products. This is an example of another hot spring, which is, there's a guy called David Hudson, who I've been working with up in a place called Tullaroo. Oh, it's not Tullaroo. Well, it is Tullaroo. There's Tullaroo Station, which is out here in Queensland. They've got hot springs, and this natural mound spring's been flying for millions of years, but these are the connectors. You'll get them from Zebedee coming across, you'll have people coming up, they'll be moving around, and you can tap the hot spring story right across the country. So that's just a little example of the hot spring story. Why is it important? And this is a publication and that talks about it, but it's one of the, this is an executive summary version of it. But this is from the Global Wellness Institute, which is that organisation. They've got a hot spring initiative within that, and you can see hot springs is a little bit, that's it. It's a $56 billion industry globally, but it is, and what we've found is a real connector into the broader wellness industry and the broader tourism industry. So wellness tourism, $639 billion industry. These reports can be downloaded free off the Global Wellness Institute website, so it's free of charge, and we as a community in the wellness industry attend an annual event, and our proceeds from that, we pay about $3,000 to go to a three-day event, 3,000 US, mind you, but a lot of that money goes into developing major reports, and that's all available to try and help grow the industry together. But yeah, there's getting that wellness overlay is going to be very important. Tourism Australia are already starting to work in that space. Visit Victoria are doing it, and they're putting it into campaigns coming up. In 2020, there will be a campaign in the hot spring and the wellness space, and Tourism Australia, there's talk about it. It hasn't been formulated fully, but if you're ahead of the game, really understanding how your product can work within the wellness space is going to be very important. Why is it important here, and why does it relate to all of the tourism bodies should be looking at it, is because this is, and again, you're not meant to look at all this, it's not meant to be a stat thing. What it is really important is these two numbers, Japan and China. The Minister said these are our growing areas here, the fastest growth sector, the largest number of people coming to this place. This is their hot spring tourism. This is hot spring visitation. Japan, 20,972 hot springs. China, 3,900 hot springs. They are the largest part of both of those industries, single sector of the tourism industry in both of those domestic countries. As you understand, here, while 20%, and this is a very high figure, nationally it's a very high figure, 20% of visitation to Northern Territory are internationals, 80% are domestic. These are really nearly all domestic. But these guys know hot springs. And if you do a wonderland and they're trying to get to nature, they're trying to get away from the pollution, particularly the Chinese visitor, and if they can have a hot spring experience in nature, you are on the money. They represent 54% between China and Japan of the total global hot spring market. These guys are absolute leaders, and we are little bubs in the wood. And yet, when you go out and you see some of our hot springs and you start to delve in further and start to understand Indigenous culture and the stories, we've got 1,000 generations of connection to the hot springs. We have some very old ancient stories that will appeal to these cultures. We can talk culture of hot springs, and we can get those people thinking this is the best thing that they've ever seen. And it will open up the door for others to go and visit the other products, to see the rock art, to experience fishing, to go and do these other activities. And when they finish the activities, they'll go and lay in a hot pool and say, wasn't that the best day I've had in my life? So this one, yeah, that's just the broader market of hot springs anyway. And this is the final little section. We're working on a couple of things. One is a World Bathing Day. So 22nd of June 2020, 22nd of June every year. Last year we started it. Globally we're celebrating bathing. So it's World Bathing Day. It's another World Day, but we're doing that basically to bring awareness to the importance of bathing and bathing and hygiene. We're also aiming to put on an event on the 22nd of June 2022 at these springs here, that says the Witjira National Park. Now that's in South Australia, but it's basically, you have to fly into Alice Springs pretty much, and then drive for 8 hours to get to this place. It is the geographic centre of Australia, or very close to the geographic centre of Australia, and it's also the location with the largest natural flow rate of hot spring water on the globe. This is an amazing place, and what we're aiming to do in this pool here on the 22nd of June 2022 is get one person from every country on earth to come and bathe in that spring at the same time as a symbol of connection and harmony and peace. But what we've got on Friday, on Friday, in 2 days' time, I'll be doing this talk in Alice Springs, and I have 22 other people in the room who are going to be travelling with us to the centre, and there's actually a couple of people coming. We're all going to be going in to do a final sign-off for this event on the 22nd of June 2022, and that's with the TOs, just to do a site clearance. Once that's done, then so with World Bathing Day, I have actually handed this around. We're doing a petition to the United Nations, and if people could go online and sign on for that and just say, yeah, I think World Bathing Day would be a great thing, it's just a way of lifting up that day as an event. I just wanted to show this video, which I'll press play in 2 seconds on it, but basically this is a video which has been produced to promote, and it's an invitation to the world. It's been done by some musicians. The Aboriginal voice you're going to hear there is done by a guy called, it's only 45 seconds. The Aboriginal voice you're going to hear is from a guy called Dean Archie. He's a TO. He's a cultural ranger for the Witjira National Park, and he's coming with us next weekend. I've been there a couple of times with him already to the park for this event, and this is basically, hasn't been the final approval, so you're seeing this, and nobody would have seen this before.
This is an invitation to come in and feel love from every side in the healing waters. The healing waters.
And I think there's a great opportunity for the Northern Territory to become a huge part of that event, and really lift up together this whole tourism story through the water and bathing story. So, thank you. And I don't. Now I think I'm all out of time, or maybe a couple of questions if there are any questions that anybody has. Charles.
Yes, I'm Stephen Harrison from Catherine. I met you 2 years ago when you were on your motorbike trip. Now, I've taken a few notes and I'm very, very nervous, so I hope this comes out all right. And this morning we had, talking about collaboration across industries and government, and you're on about we have to live and care for the environment. And I think we all here know that we have to care for our environment, for ourselves, for our community, and for future generations. And without a healthy environment, our strong communities, and without a healthy environment and strong communities, of course, there's no economy. So we all know that that the Territory needs an open and strong framework to protect our unique natural environment. And we look to our government for this protection. However, our environment laws are being dictated by industry lobbyists, and they can harm our area. And I know you come from Victoria, and because we have fracking that's going to start in the Territory, and we are a little bit concerned because your speech was all about water, and there's a lot of people in the NT that are very concerned about our water. So how do you think we should go about making sure that the government keeps to very firm a framework, for wood protection laws? How do we make sure that the industry lobbyists don't get in and water down these our environmental laws?
I think we've got to stand together. I mean, because the water is the resource here. I certainly, when I heard about that and I came and visited and met a couple of people in Katherine about the fracking problem, and I think that needs to be fully debated and discussed, but the more people that stand up behind it, the better. We certainly straight away went off and printed some petition documents, and we printed about 5,000 of them and handed them out at our hot spring, because we've got numbers of people coming through, raising awareness for that problem, and the lack of science and lack of clarity which was there. I mean, when you spoke to the government about it, they think it's okay, they think it's safe. But when you're talking about water and water resources, we have to be so precious with it. I mean, this is our life. Our bodies, 75% by weight, we're water. By molecule, we're 99% water. Water is us and we are water. So we have to protect it like we'd protect our family. So I think it's a matter of the awareness, asking a question just like you have now, and then making sure it comes back to our politicians and you're hearing it from many sources and right across the country. So it's standing up. The reason the Franklin Dam wasn't built is because we stood up as a nation. So it's really important that the awareness is shared.
And sorry, just to follow on from Katrina there, with what you've just outlined with the hot springs and everything else, which looks wonderful and fantastic for the future, how would you see a potential conflict there between industrialisation of the outback with all the wells and the gas heads and all the rest of it that the unconventional gas industry is going to bring? And of course, when you're putting out their wellness and everything else, how do you fit in, I guess, your theme with that reality, particularly around places like Mataranka, which sits on the doorstep of that stuff?
I think what we've got to show is, with gas, the thing about gas and those non-renewable resources is they'll be sucked out and they'll be done. Now, if they leave the environment degraded for it, they're going to be letting it for generations to come. If we can show from statistics, and that's why I think download these things and you can get real evidence-based information about the importance of this industry, it can be a sustainable, long-term, thousands of years, thousands of generations to come. These hot springs in the centre, they've been flying for over 1 million years. Way before anybody was here, those waters have been coming to the surface. And that's the same right across the NT, right across the country, where the hot springs, they've been flying for eternal. This is as long as there's been Earth here. And I think that once you can turn that into a beautifully designed, sustainable model, then the economics will talk for itself. People will come, they will come and visit, they'll be lying in the pool. I mean, how more gentle an experience can you have than having somebody lying in a pool looking at the environment and then talking about the beauty of the relationship you have with the people you're with and the relationship you have with the environment. I think let the economics do it. Let's build a number of them, and they're there. It's not build, it's actually build the story. It's actually talk about the story and how to connect the dots in that story so they're all working together. And then suddenly you've got a theme, and it's a sustainable long-term theme that can override all the need to do that kind of mining, because this is eternal and will employ people. And anyway.
So you think they can be coexistent? Can you have a wellness?
I don't think if you wreck the environment, I think you've got to understand the science of if they're mining and that destroys the environment, and then you don't have a bathing place, and you don't have the wellness. I mean, but I'm not the scientist. And I think you need to be looking for evidence base. And if it's that or that, if it's the easy dig a hole in the ground, or it's put people in the water above the ground, this one lasts for eternity, and this will happen. This will be one contract, finish in a few years' time, and then just like Darwin's facing right now, suddenly there's this whole vacuum of people who aren't coming in, aren't flying in. The stats are all down because of one mining operation that stopped. I mean, like, you're dependent, instead of having, and it's the strength of our business, we have 500,000 visitors a year. If we make a mistake with one visitor, that's one unhappy visitor, which we're worried about. If you have a problem with a mining company, with Mitsubishi, with one of the big companies, and they pull out, you're stuffed. You know, you have 20%, 30% drop in your economy because of the reliance on one person. Tourism actually allows us to diversify our risk as a community, and you have, because you've got lots of people giving you a little bit of money. So there's a huge safety piece in it, but it's an opportunity to tell stories, and I think we're done. Yeah?
We have got time for one more question.
Okay.
Just a very brief one, Charles. Well, first, it's actually very two-pronged. The first one, I'm fascinated to find out how your headache went when you introduced your speech. Did floating in the water get rid of your headache?
When I introduced my speech...
when you first went to the first hot spring.
Oh,
with a headache.
yeah. Well, it moved. I forgot about it because I was so enthralled with this new idea.
everything else?
So you chase the shiny object, and that's become the shiny object of my life, the hot spring. So, yeah.
Wonderful. The other is, I'm fascinated by this. Lucky enough to go to Pagosa Springs in southern Colorado in January, and we were lying around in the pools there saying something like this should happen in the Northern Territory. And then you come and sort of save the tremendous potential. I'm very interested to know, with so many different spring areas in the Northern Territory, is the mineral makeup of the water always the same, or is it different? Could you have a wellness trail trying different water types going from one spring to another?
100%. You just need to, I mean, it's very cheap and easy analysis to do. You just get a water sample. There's a company called ALS, which is one of the water laboratories, but there are a number of them. You can just get a plastic bottle. I haven't got one here. But, a plastic water bottle, this is what they'll tell you to do. Make sure you rinse it out properly, fill it up with the spring water and send it off to ALS. They'll come back with a full mineral analysis. You do that for each of the springs, and then suddenly you'll be able to... You can get that analysed. I mean, I had it analysed in Japan. They got the numbers done here, but then I sent it off to some scientists in Japan. I mean, I know a lot more now, so when you look at it, you're looking for magnesium, potassium, in our water, for example, magnesium, potassium, boron, selenium, calcium. Really, you do want to check that, because there are some springs which are radioactive, like in South Australia. There's some radioactive springs which... you come out glowing at night and you don't need a torch, but you've got to watch out. But most of them, all the ones I've been to, you can smell it, you can feel it. They're beautiful, pure water. But there's a story. There are different layers of story. So you're going to have the story of the water itself, which is more a European health story about this one will cure this and this will cure that. That's only one market. The tourism market's more about the relaxation, and it's how do you connect to the environments. And that's where I think the Indigenous story is really important, about what were the stories of this place, how was it used traditionally, where was it. For Dalhousie, for example, they've got, Iwaniri, which is the Dalhousie Springs itself. It means healing spring in the traditional language. Then you've got the mother spring, you've got the grandfather spring, you've got the young man spring. They've got all these different springs around there which are brought up in the sort of the family, the broader family. And I was taken to Mother Spring once by Dean Archie, which is out of grounds for other people, but we were brought there with him, the TO and the place. And you hopped in this water. I've never had an experience like it in my life. It had this sort of organic matter in it, and you jumped in, you could swim, but about a metre underground, underneath there was all this organic matter, and you'd float in it, and it wrapped right round you. And you had this warm embrace of a 360-degree embrace of nature. And it was like profound. So each spring will have its own gift, and it's a matter of being able to find that gift, honour that gift, and then make sure that you don't overdevelop it. There's a lot of... We've got to be very careful not to suddenly, follow this shiny object and then and abuse it and not have a social conscience behind the investment. We have to be very careful that we don't, open the box and something else jumps in. Anyway, thank you.